Hey there, ACCA students. In this video, I'm going to help you pass your upcoming PM, that's Performance Management exam. I'm going to take you through the Specimen exam. We're going to do Section A, the OT questions. We're going to do the first 8. In this video, I'll debrief them with you, sharing lots of tips and tricks. Now, if you find these videos helpful, check the description below. You can access my debrief of over 100 ACCA OT questions. All the info is down in the description. Guys, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please give it a like. Alrighty, let's get started. I'm in the ACCA practice platform. I've assigned myself the PM Specimen exam. I've opened it and I'm going to start Section A, the 15 OT questions. I highly recommend at this point, hit pause on the video, go into the practice platform, try this set of questions first, then come back, continue viewing the video. You'll get so much more out of it. Welcome back. We're in Section A. I recommend you start with Section A in the real exam. There will be questions covering the whole syllabus or most of the syllabus, so you'll be able to find some questions that you can do. And I recommend you give yourself 54 minutes for your first pass through Section A. Try to do the easiest ones first. After that, you go back through with the remaining time, clean up the more difficult ones. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to go check out question 1. Question 1, first thing we always do, read this requirement. And we see activity-based costing. Not the most difficult topic in the syllabus, but it's a bit tricky. Lots of numbers, lots of calculations. And we need a budgeted overhead cost per unit of product D. Very important. Always read the question before you start. We look at the answers. We see we've got multiple choice. So we could put down a guess if we needed to. We could flag it, and we could come back later. If this one looks tricky to you, and it looks a bit tricky to me, I would probably flag this if this was the first question. I'd go through there looking for the shorter, easier questions. Then I'd come back and do this one. And I even have a guess ready to go if I don't make it back in time. However, we're here to learn. Let's do the question together. If we have activity-based costing, we've got to go through 4 steps. First thing we need to do, find the cost pools. This is the breakdown of the overheads into categories. Second step, we've got to find some drivers. These are the activities that correspond to each cost pool, okay, that change based on production of a certain product. Step 3, cost per driver. So we make a rate, essentially an overhead absorption rate for each of the cost pools. 4, then we can get to a cost per unit based on our work in steps 1 to 3. So those are the steps. Let's now dig into the question. It's always a good idea. Lay out your steps. Make sure you know where you're going when you get into those numbers. So first off, we got to get a cost per unit for D. Let's make sure we stay focused on that. And right away, I see we've got 3 cost pools, the 140, the 80, and the 96. Next step, we found our cost pools. Let's look here and find our drivers. Well, we've got units of production, we've got hours, labor hours, we've got production runs, we've got inspections. Can we line those up with the cost pools? Sure we can. We've got production runs required. That's going to line up with our production run setup costs. One setup per production run. We've got inspections, number of inspections. That's going to line up with my inspection costs. And we learn about one more thing. Other overheads are lined up with our labor hours. And this is the tricky part of the question. For the production runs and the inspections, that's the total required for this period. However, look at this. For labor hours, they give us the unit level and then the total. 13 plus 15, that equals 28. 5 plus 3, that equals 8. Plus 8 plus 10, that does not equal 48, guys. That equals 18. So what we've got to do is get the total. And that would be 8,000. 1,000 times 8, 8,000. And 4 times 10, 40,000. Now, that makes sense. 8 plus 40 is 48. That's where that 48 comes from. Once we clear that hurdle, the rest of it is straightforward. So we are now going to assign the overheads to the product D. So the labor hours, well, we'll go in order here. Production setup costs, that's going to be 15 over 28 right here. 15 over 28. That percentage of the total will go to product D. So I multiply that by 15 over 28. Total inspections, that's going to be multiplied by 3 over 8. And then the other overheads, that's going to be multiplied by 40 over 48. Okay, so now we've done step 1, cost pools, step 2, cost driver, and now I'm going to mix steps 3 and 4. I'm going to get the total costs for the total number of Ds that we're going to do, and that comes to 75,000 for the production setup. Inspection costs, that's going to come to 30,000. And the other overheads is going to come to 80,000. I add those up and I get a 185. Those are the total costs for my 4,000 units. And if I divide that by 4,000, remember we're in thousands, and we will get 46.25. Guys, that's the answer. Answer is the second one. Activity-based costing, tricky and time-consuming. Make sure you practice this in your exam kit. Next question here. Let's read the question stem. What is LPM's seasonally adjusted revenue forecast for quarter 2 of 2017? So guys, we have time series. To quickly review what we're going to do, we are going to run a trend into the future using a linear equation. Okay, that'll be a straight line. And in our ACCA questions, they always do the seasonality on quarters. At least that's what I've always seen. So now we're going to find some quarters down here on this x-axis. And superimposed on the trend, we then have the seasonality. So at the holiday seasons, maybe there's more sales, then it kind of drops down, then it kind of goes up again. So depending on what quarter they want from us, we will then, after we establish the trend, let's say it's over here, we would then apply the seasonal variation, if it's positive or negative. That's what we're going to do. Now we know what we're doing. Let's read the story. Well, we've got the trend line. They always give this to us. We've got the 2,000 plus 25x. X denotes the quarter. So sales are growing by 25 per quarter. And quarter 1 is 2015. Quarter 1 in 2015 is number 13. And we see now that we've got multiplicative, not additive. Multiplicative means this. If we have a trend, additive would be this. The amplitude of the lines is fixed. It doesn't change. If it's multiplicative, the amplitude will change in relationship to that trend line. As the trend gets bigger, the swings in the amplitude get bigger. That's multiplicative. Okay? So we want the second quarter of 2007. So I'm going to, first of all, take it old school and count the number of quarters. I can just make a quick timeline. And 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, 4. So here we've got, this will be 2015, that's x5. This will be x6. And then this will be x7 over here, and we need to get to the second quarter. Now we need to count up the quarters to get to that second quarter of 2017. And they told us that Q1 of 2015 is actually quarter 13. So we can just count that up. We've got 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So the second quarter of 2000 x7 will be quarter 22. Guys, now it's easy peasy lemon squeezy. I take the trend, which is 2000 plus 25 multiplied by x is going to be 22. And we are in quarter 2 of the year. So now we need to multiply that by 1 minus 0.08. So if it's a positive number here, that means it's an increase. So that would be 1.04 for quarter 3. That would be 1.24. But over here, because it's negative, it's going to be 0.98, right? 0.92, excuse me, 0.92, right? We take off the 0.08. So now I just multiply everything here by 0.92. I put those numbers into my calculator, and we get 2, 3, 4, 6. Guys, the answer, plug it right into your multiple choice box. Don't use a comma. Don't use any decimal places. And there we go. That is the correct answer. Just coming back to this for a second, how did I get the 0.92? If you have a question, it's going to be 1 minus 0.08 is equal to 0.92. That's how I got that 0.92. Moving on to question number 3, we read the question stem, and if we only make product 1, how many units would need to be sold in order to achieve a profit of $60,000 in each year? We're now looking at cost, volume, profit. Before you read the story, you've got to remember the formula. A target profit, it's very similar to break-even number of units. If we review break-even number of units, that's simply going to be the fixed costs, I'll abbreviate that FC, fixed costs, over the contribution per unit. And if you remember contribution per unit, that is simply the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. All of the variable costs, not just production variable costs. Okay? We sell a unit, but we had to pay the variable costs in order to sell that unit, to produce and sell it. So what's left over is contribution. But we don't want to just break even. We also want a target profit. So on top of the fixed costs, we've got to add our target profit. P for profit, target profit. So that's the formula we're going for. And we're only going to make product P1. So let's just set up a little template here. And let's look at the costing. And we see the usual suspects. We've got prices, and we also have some variable costs here, minus the fixed overhead per unit. That's the tricky part of this question. Whenever we see fixed costs here in a product costing, that's at the unit level, and overhead absorption rate has already been applied. So if we get to contribution per unit, it's 10 minus all of this, or we can even just take the profit per unit and add back those fixed costs. We'd get to the same place. So that contribution per unit then is going to be 4.4. That's my contribution per unit, $4.40 for P1. That's going to be in the numerator. Now we need to add 60,000, right? That's the target profit that we're aiming for. Right there, that's going to be there. The missing piece of the puzzle, the fixed costs. To calculate the fixed costs, we need to reverse engineer the overhead absorption rate. And we have those right here. We've got the 1.2 for product P1. We've got the $1 for P2. Now, the trick in this question is this one final sentence. The fixed costs in P2 also include 2.5. That is specific to product P2, but we're not making any P2s. We're only making P1s, so we do not have product-specific fixed costs if we don't make that product. So we need to peel the 2,500 off of it at the end. So to get the fixed costs, I'm going to multiply 10,000 times 1.2. That's going to be 12,000 plus 12.5 times 1. That's going to be 12.5 thousand minus the 2,500. All of that, guys, is how we'll calculate the fixed costs. You can do all of this in your fancy-dancy scientific calculator to save time. And when we're all done, it comes to 18 636. That is the correct answer, plugging it into our fill in the blank box right here. 18636. That's a wrap on question 3. Moving on to question 4, we find our first theoretical style question. These ones, often you can do them faster than the numerical ones. They might be difficult, but we can do them faster. So my approach would be to go through all of the questions. I'd probably scoop up these first. And if I'm not sure, I'm just going to guess at it and get it out of the way. So we have the classic ACCA question type, choosing 2 out of 4 statements. And this is all about environmental management accounting. And this is a test of the deep book knowledge. So it's actually a rather tricky question. You'll have had to read the details on this topic and memorize all to get a pass. But my approach now, I'm not going to go looking for the correct answers. I'm also going to go looking to eliminate distractors. And I'm going to go to statement 2. And if you remember input-output analysis, here we're looking for efficiency, we're looking for waste. We want to measure the units in versus the units out. Input-output analysis does not go with flows. That's flow cost accounting. So right away we see the approach of the question writer, just to mix up definitions of topics. So now, look at that. This one went out. Now, if I go to the first statement, the majority of environmental costs are already captured in a typical organization's accounting system. The difficulty lies in identifying and classifying them. That one is good. Those costs are in there, but they're probably buried in the overheads, okay, or treated as production costs. So if we dig around in our accounting systems, we can probably find those environmental costs. Now, we got 2 more to deal with, and I'm loving this one. Life cycle costing goes with identifying costs from design to phase out. So it's 1 and 4 that are correct. If we go to the third option, the most difficult option here, you will need to have read your materials really well. Even if you hadn't, you can still get to the correct answer by eliminating 1 and then finding 2 that are good. What's wrong here? They simply changed out one of the words in the definition. It's not the environment-driven costs, but it's the environment-related that are easy to trace to a cost center. So a pollution scrubbing device in the smokestack of a factory, that would be related to the cost center, that production center. So that's what they're saying there. It's 1 and 4 that are correct. Moving on to question 5, this might be the most difficult question in section A. I would probably, in the real exam, flag this and come back to it, but let me take you through it. I've recorded this question before. Here is how I answer this difficult question. Wow, what a difficult question. 5 lines of writing. The figures are embedded in the sentences. This will take a lot of time to unpack. If you've tried this question in other sources, the solution actually takes you through all of the numbers, but we don't need to do that. We can use a really nice shortcut, because check out the answers. First thing to recognize is that the solution does not have numbers. There are no numbers here. So that's an important clue. Maybe we can solve this question with logic only. Okay, we don't have to perform calculations. Let's review what those variances are all about, then we will make quick work of this question. So, if we are looking, everybody, pardon my artwork, mix variance first. We are looking at the ratio of the inputs. And we need to compare the standard mix to the actual mix. And because there are no calculations, maybe we can just do this logically. So let's do mix variance first, then we'll come back and do yield. Let's come back to the question. And we have to find the inputs. We have to find which input is the cheap, which is the expensive. Then we have to find the actual. So we find the standard first, the actual second. And as we read the story, we see in order to make 19 liters of X, it takes 8 of A, 12 of B. So there's a bit of a normal loss there, but doesn't concern me at this point. We've identified two inputs, A and B, 8 of A, 12 of B. That is the ratio, 8 to 12, okay, or 3 to 4. Now, if we read the next sentence, we can identify which is the cheap, which is the expensive input. And chemical A costs 20 per liter. Chemical B costs 25. So check that out, everybody. That's the cheaper of the two. That's the expensive. Okay, let's come back down to this little table that we made. So we have standard A, B. Okay, that was 8 to 12. That's the cheap. That's the expensive. Now, let's dig around in the question for the actual inputs. How much material did we actually use in production? Okay. Can we find that? Sure we can. During September, actual results showed that we got 1,850 of output, but I don't need that yet, using a total input of 900A, 1100B. Let's just put those numbers side by side. Now if we look at actual, product A, product B, 900 and 1100. Oh, look at that. If we drop the zeros, if we drop the 100s, now we see 9 versus 11. So using logic, we can see that the company used a greater percentage of product A, of input A, and a lower percentage of product B. A is the cheaper stuff, okay? So they used more of the cheap, less of the expensive. Therefore, the mix variance, everybody, is favorable. Let's now move on to the yield. And now we need to look at the actual output of finished goods. And if we can draw our process again, the yield variance is looking at the inputs versus the output. Let's find out how much goes into one unit and how much we get out. Then we'll compare that to the actual. Okay, so if we come back to our question here, to produce 19 units, we have to put in 8 plus 12. Guys, that is 20. So 20 goes in, 19 comes out. How much did we actually get, everybody? We got 18. We got 18,500. Look at that. We got 18,500 out. How much did we put in? We put in 900 plus 1100. Guys, that is 2000. So we put in 2000. So the yield variance is looking at in versus out. Guys, the standard says we should put in 20 liters. We get 19. The actual results show that we put in 2,000 and we got out 18,500. Okay, now you see what's going on here. Put a decimal place there, put a decimal place there, and it's easy to compare to the standard. So we put in 2,000 units of input, which should yield 19. Didn't yield 19, it yielded 18.5. So we got fewer units from our inputs. Everybody, yield variance is adverse. Okay, so which combination from the solution works for us? The mix was favorable, yield was adverse. The answer is D. Guys, we just solved quite a difficult question, but if you stay cool, if you step back and look at the big picture, very often when it's a difficult question, there is an easy shortcut. And here we saw that. We did not need to do the math as the model answer showed us. Instead, we used logic. Moving on to question 6, we've got a drag and drop situation happening here. And I like these. These are fun. I just go easiest to most difficult. So let's start with the easiest things first, incremental budgeting. This is the traditional approach where we take last year's budget or actuals and we just apply several very simple new assumptions for the year, like a new inflation rate or maybe a new production volume. But the problem is we don't go back and we don't investigate why those line items are in our budget in the first place. So it could definitely build in the previous problems and inefficiencies. So the first option goes with incremental budgeting. The next one that I like is zero-based budgeting. Here, instead of taking last year's numbers, okay, we go to our cost center managers. We ask them to set their own departmental budgets based on determining cost packages, what resources do they need, why do they need them. Then they present their cost packages to a budget manager, a budget committee. The whole purpose of this to reduce wasteful expenditure, right from the textbook. So we like this one here. Rolling budget, that one, we always have a budget looking 1 year into the future. When quarter 1 elapses, we add a new quarter on the end of our budget. When quarter 2 elapses, we add a new quarter 2. That's in contrast to an annual approach. So I'm liking the 5th one with rolling budget. Flexible budgeting, if you remember, here we break our costs down, we analyze them, and we find our fixed costs, our variable costs, and our semi-variable costs. Now we can make a budget based on any activity level within a given range. So I'm liking cost patterns. That's the clue. Cost behavior patterns goes with the flexible budgeting. So we have focus on controlling the causes of costs. That one goes with activity-based budgeting. Here we're looking at cost drivers. If you remember, when we produce units, we create a demand for activities. The more we produce, the more activities we consume. Under activity-based budgeting, we're going to focus on controlling the consumption of activities, which will control the causes of costs. Last but not least, we have beyond budgeting, possibly the most difficult of the PM approaches to wrap your head around. It's really a philosophy of performance management. The traditional approach might use the budget, our fixed financial budget, as the source of KPIs for many of our managers. So we give the sales manager a fixed sales revenue target. We give the production manager a cost target. Well, the proponents of beyond budgeting, they argue that in a modern, dynamic industry and company, things change so quickly, we can't use the budget as the only source of KPIs. We should use other approaches and tools. Anyway, it's the last one by process of elimination that goes here with beyond budgeting. Guys, there you have it. Question 6. Question 7. Here we have a classic. Here we have decision trees. I've copied this question into the spreadsheet here so I can do the math a bit more neatly. And look at this. We're trying to make a decision. We're trying to deal with our leisure company, and we're in decline. So we've got 3 decisions, right? And each branch represents a decision. We can shut down and sell. We can do the major or the minor upgrades. Okay, now look at the answers there. Which one can we just eliminate immediately? One of those can come out. Well, yes, D. D is not feasible as an option. It's expected values, right? It's the best expected value is what we go with. And I want you to remember that decision trees is just an extension of the expected value concept. We're going to calculate the expected value of each branch, and that is how we will make our decision. So we're going to compare shut down and sell against the upgrades. All right, and now we're always going to be working from the right to the left, and when we get to an outcome, we need to find an expected value at that outcome. So the major upgrade, we're starting with at the 11 and the 7.5, working to the left, and we have probabilities. The probability of good results there is 8. That means the probability is of poor results would be 20%, right? 0.880. 1 minus that is 20%. Okay, so the major upgrade, right, the expected value, make column there, that's going to be equal to the 11 million multiplied by 80%, 0.8, okay, plus the poor results, which are 7.5 million, okay, multiplied by 0.2, the 20%. And the minor upgrade then, that's going to be equal to that 9 million multiplied by 70%, 0.7, there it is right in the question, minus 1 minus 0.7, or 30%. So that's going to then be the poor results of 6. Multiplied by 0.3. Okay. There we go. That should have been a plus there. Okay, and we get an 8.1. Now, the only thing we have to do then is subtract from that the costs, okay, of the upgrade. So I can just come back into this cell. Let me wrap what I did in brackets. Okay, and now I can subtract from that the 4.5 million of cost. Minor upgrade had 2 million of cost. Wrap those in brackets, parentheses, excuse me, minus 2, 6.1. Okay, now we have the expected value of each decision. Shut down and sell, right? There's no probability there. That's just going to cost 5.75. Or that's going to give me 5.75 returns. And I would like to maximize the returns. And 6.1 is the highest number. So I will go with the minor upgrade, guys. Friends, there you have it. That's decision trees. Essentially assigning an expected value of profit to each branch of our decision tree, each possible outcome, and then making our decision based on the highest expected value of profit. Question number 8, we read the question stem first, and we see ranking products in the order they should be manufactured, assuming the objective is to maximize profit. Guys, we have another ACCA classic here. We've got limiting factors, single limiting factors. So step 1, we've got to get contribution per unit. Step 2, then we get the contribution per unit of scarce resource. And the final step is then to rank the products based on that contribution per unit of scarce resource. Here's the trick. No matter what they ask us for, whether it's profit or contribution, we're going to work in terms of contribution. In the short term, the fixed costs will not change based on our production plan, unless those fixed costs are product specific. Okay, so that's the trick here, to work in contribution, not profit. So step 1, can we get the contribution per unit? Well, I think we can do that rather quickly. We have a profit per unit, and the profit per unit is calculated by subtracting all of these costs off of a selling price. But you know that contribution per unit is only the variable costs. So all we have to do is add the fixed overhead back to the profit. And for A, then we get a 46. For B, we get a 52. For C, we get a 21. And for D, we get a 60. And what do we learn? We learn that labor hours will be limited to 4,000, right? So the labor hours will be the scarcity here. So now we need to divide that contribution per unit, okay, by the labor hours. And we get 46 divided by 6. That comes to 7.7, rounding off. (52) divided by 8, that comes to 6.5. 21 divided by 3, that comes to 7. And 60 divided by 2 is 15. Okay, so that's contribution per labor hour is what we've just calculated. Now, if we want to maximize our profit, we need to maximize our contribution, and we do that by producing units which give us highest contribution per labor hour. So this one will be number 1. This one will be number 2. This one will be number 3. That will be number 4. So of course in the exam, we'll need to do the dragging and the dropping. D goes to 1. A goes to 2. C goes to 3. B goes to 4. There you have it. Question 8. Not too bad. PM team, there you have it. The first 8 questions from Section A of the Specimen exam. If you found that helpful, check out the link right here. You can get access to all of my PM question debriefs. Guys, good luck on your upcoming ACCA PM exam.